If you're seeking everyday holiness, check out this episode. We discuss the lives of the saints, the beautiful vocation of marriage and religious life, and all kinds of ways to serve the church with Olivia Castlen, a record news reporter and writer, journalist for the Catholic newspaper in the Archdiocese of Louisville, on Spirit and Spire, starting right now.
Broadcasting from the Cathedral of the Assumption in Louisville, Kentucky, this is Spirit and Spire. And now, here is your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Spirit and Spire. I'm your host today, John Soule, and joined with me is a very, very involved Catholic now today in the Archdiocese of Louisville. She works for the Record newspaper, and that is Olivia Castlen. And I made sure to get that right because you just got married, right?
Yes, that's right, this May, so...
That's very exciting. Yeah. So Vincent wanted to be here, but he was out of town at the Theology of the Body Institute, so we're praying for him. But I know that he had a lot of ideas and questions and excitement about this because he was a good friend of yours, right? At Bellarmine, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
That's awesome. So Vincent's a very dear friend, and he works with us with Family Renewal Project, which is where I am. But and we had actually interviewed you a couple months ago when you were, I think, interviewing for the Record as well. Mm-hmm. So that was a very exciting time in your life, looking at all your options and seeing what God was doing.
Yeah, I mean, when me and my husband decided to move back to Louisville, it was awesome because I knew that I wanted to work in the Catholic Church in some way, and I had assumed that it would be in ministry because that's what that's what I grew up thinking that I was going to do. That's what I did in college, and, while working for the Record is not, forward-facing ministry in the way that a lot of people think about ministry, it's definitely a work of the church.
Yes, and I've felt that because I've read several of your articles, and I just feel the Holy Spirit is really imbued within your words. It's like God is leading you to the right people and the right things to really highlight, and that's a gift, And so I think the Holy Spirit is definitely involved in what God is doing in your life. And so I guess before we jump into some of the different people you've met and articles you've written, perspective you've gained, maybe we can share a little bit about you, your faith journey, and kind of what led you into the heart of the church.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up not too far from here in Bowling Green, Kentucky, so about 2 hours away from Louisville. And I grew up actually in an interfaith home. So my dad is Baptist, my mom's Catholic. So I have kind of an interesting childhood experience, I think, than most, in that I went to the Baptist church one Sunday and then the Catholic Mass the next Sunday, and that's pretty much how I was raised for my whole childhood. So really, involved in both the Protestant churches and in the Catholic Masses, and received all my sacraments growing up, but had a kind of an unusual environment in that way. I have 2 older sisters, so we all kind of did that together.
Yeah, that's fun. And I bet that was a very unique perspective, too.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's been really helpful just in my life and growing up to kind of understand both perspectives and, having been involved in both communities and, really deep diving into both communities. I think it's really what made my spiritual life really rich growing up.
And you reach a lot of people that way.
Yeah, for sure.
That's cool.
For sure. Yeah, so, I grew up in a family where, as you can tell, religion was really important to us, although in different ways. So I grew up that way, and I really got into my faith in the beginning of high school. I started reading the Bible, which is pretty crazy. I'm not exactly sure where I got the idea, but I just started reading it for 15 minutes a day and just wanted to get through the Bible. So it took me 3 years, from freshman year to midway through my junior year, maybe sophomore year.
So you successfully read through the entire Bible while you were in high school.
Yes.
That's unique. That's very awesome.
So there was a really pivotal point for me in kind of centering myself more in Catholicism, because I was, growing up with both traditions, it was a little bit confusing growing up, and not really knowing where I was going to end up or, where I belonged. But through reading the Bible, I, really just fell in love with the person of Jesus a lot more. And, it was kind of shocking realizing that so many of the things that the Catholic Church talks about and so many of the traditions of the Catholic Church, the Mass, the Eucharist, anointing the sick, reconciliation, all of those things have a basis in the Bible. And so, getting my hands on that for pretty much the first time was really influential in helping me see, that this is, based in Scripture. And so that was really convicting for me. So I really, deep dived into my faith from doing that. And then towards the later end of my high school career, my sister, the one right above me in the line, she got really involved with Focus, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students on Western Kentucky University's campus.
Ah, yes, that's
Yes.
right. They came right after I graduated. I graduated from Western
Dang.
Kentucky in 2013. So, but I'd say like all of the community life that was established there by Father Mike Williams, I think was like the seedbed for him to have this ability to bring Focus initially. So there was so much activity there while I was there. So it was a gift, but it
That's
was
great.
different than how Focus, I guess, did it in that way. But it's a gift that they came.
Yes, no, I mean, he's an amazing priest. He was a great leader on that campus and in other campuses that he's led as well. But she got really involved with Focus and, pretty much did a 180, got really involved with her faith. And I just kind of watched her transform, before my eyes. I think, with siblings, you kind of see the worst sides and the best sides of each other. And so that was a really dramatic thing to witness, my sister to have a really large conversion. So she started inviting me to daily masses, to different events happening on campus. And that was while I was a senior in high school. So up until that point, I had a pretty strong relationship with Jesus, growing up with prayer and then getting really into, biblical theology and things like that. But I didn't really have a foundation based in the church, I would say. I was pretty skeptical of the church, actually, and really struggled with a lot of church teachings growing up, especially having having a lot of questions coming from my Protestant friends and family. And so I really struggled with that and was kind of leaning more towards the Protestant religions. But from having that witness, became a lot more trusting of the Catholic Church and just doing my research, being just really interested in knowing the truth and pursuing the truth. So she helped me get involved a lot with the campus ministry there while I was in high school. And that's where I started going to daily mass with her, actually, when I was a senior.
Wow.
And believe it or not, when I tell people this, they don't believe me, but growing up, having the Baptist services and then the Catholic Mass, I really wasn't convicted that Jesus was present in the Eucharist and was really skeptical of that. And so when I started going to daily mass, I'm not sure that I would have vocally told somebody that I didn't believe that Jesus was present in the Eucharist. But I was very skeptical, and started going to daily mass without believing that Jesus was present in the Eucharist. And
Wow.
Went for quite a while. But I remember probably in my head it was about a month or so in. It might have been longer, but about a month or so in, I remember just praying in mass. And or before mass, actually, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Jesus is present in the Eucharist, and it was really just a grace. I don't think it's something that I could have summed up in myself, but it was just a real grace to know that what the Catholic Church teaches about the Eucharist is true, and that I would say has been the biggest life changer and kind of directed my path moving on. I decided to pursue ministry through theology in college. And really just, fell in love with Jesus and the Eucharist through that. And it's kind of pushed me through into where I am now. Obviously, many points of conversion have happened since then, but really just realizing that Jesus was present in the Eucharist kind of changed everything for me.
That's so important. And that's honestly similar to what I experienced in college too. Like the conversion of understanding Jesus is actually present in the Eucharist is, I think, one of the most stabilizing factors in you just finding peace in the church.
I mean, for me, I had many things that I had to be won over with what the church teaches, and just being won over for the church. But for me, knowing that was true is, where else do you go once you know
exactly.
That's true?
That's what right.
And if the church is right about that, then what else are they right about? And once you have that intimacy with Jesus in the Eucharist, I could never give that up for anything.
Yeah. It's the source and summit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's kind of where we got, well, it's not where we got Spirit Inspired, but as we've done the episodes, we've kind of learned that's really what it is. It's the source and summit, the heights and the depths. It's the Spirit and the spire. Now, you think of the heights of heaven and all of what we long for and our deepest desires, but also then the depths of our hearts and both in the joys and the sufferings that are the places where we have to be vulnerable and intimate with God and one another to find conversion and healing. And that's, I think, what this is about. Like, these conversations are giving us that opportunity to do that, to really just sit and listen to each other's hearts, to open ourselves to that. So, and I think that's what draws everyone into these conversations. Eric Huff, one of our co-hosts, had said, there's this poster of a bunch of kids like eating ice cream or something, and they're just hanging out with each other. And there was another kid sitting right next to them that was actually you took a picture of the kid sitting next to a billboard, and he was also eating ice cream. And it was almost like that's kind of what we want people to feel when we have this time. So anyone watching can get a sense that they're part of this conversation and drawn into your conversion story, Olivia. That's the gift, because we have to remember there's sacred space between us and the cameras, and for you, between you and your pen, right? Or your typewriter, I guess. Yeah. Well, not okay, we're a little bit further ahead than the 1930s, but you know what I mean. So, but anyway, now you had different topics that you were really hoping to break open today before we get into, some of the things that you do in the record. But your faith journey kind of informs what you do in ministry. So what were some of the things that you did post-college before you jumped into the record? Like, what was that like as you delved into the church and wanting to serve more?
Yeah. So I actually got really involved in serving with the church while in college. It was just something that I felt convicted about. I really got involved in youth ministry. Youth ministry was something that was really pivotal for me growing up as well, especially in my struggle. It's a lot of retreats and conferences I credit to keeping me in the faith until high school, and I started, having that desire to dive into it myself. Those were really pivotal for me. So I wanted to get involved with that and did. And then really being involved in just campus ministry as well, and having that one-on-one accompaniment that Focus models to its students. I was able to take that onto the college campus as well. But really I had kind of something a little bit, I guess not what I imagined whenever I left college. So I actually met my husband at the very end of my college career. I met him in between my junior and senior year. I think that's right.
At Western Kentucky?
No. At Bellarmine. I was at Bellarmine,
that's right.
But we met through a summer program, actually.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, so we actually met out in Colorado through a program that Focus puts on called Summer Projects. So we met and became really good friends and ended up dating. And by the time that my senior year rolled around, we knew kind of what was coming in the future. And so I made the choice that I wanted to move where his job was, so that we could stop the long distance situation that was going on, because he had graduated a year earlier than me. So we had done long distance for the entirety of our relationship.
That's hard.
It was very difficult. Yes. I wouldn't recommend it, but it was very fruitful in our lives, and I would do it over and over again.
Well, on some level, it gave you the opportunity just to talk and really spend time in that way, like getting to know the person of one another. That's a gift. Yeah. No, I mean, any form of communication, whatever it might have been, what was a gift. So, yeah. But I knew that, you can do long distance dating, but you can't do long distance marriage. And we wanted to get married. So, I guess you could do long distance marriage, but we're not cut out for that. No. So I decided to make the move for his job. And so, I was leaving a lot of, building up a lot of connections in Louisville as I was in college. And I really saw myself continuing to work in Louisville. I was working at a parish at the time and really loved it. But I was willing to make that sacrifice. So I
he was working in Tennessee, and so decided to make the move. And he got placed in a city where there was only one Catholic church. And that Catholic church was not hiring. They had no need for any additional staff at the time that I was looking for jobs. So I was searching for, the months leading up to graduation and was looking for, a job in ministry. That's what I wanted to do. That's what my field was in. All of my experience, everything on my resume points towards ministry. And yeah, there was plenty of opportunities at the Catholic school there, but not any in the church side of things. So I, prayed a lot and was asking the Lord what he wanted. And there was a job that actually opened up at the school in their front office, doing kind of administrative work. So, I took that, and it was a very, it was a kind of a work in humility for me because, I'm used to doing that forward-facing ministry, very much have the attitude of, I'm going to do something good for you, Lord, like, watch out, world. And so I really felt the invitation, even just discerning into marriage, I felt the, invitation to kind of, be, I guess, not in the spotlight and kind of being in a vocation, where I may not get acknowledged for all the amazing things that I could do, and then I felt that as well with the job. It's often, I think, when you, after having had the job, you notice how much, those people in the front offices, the secretaries, the administrators, how much work that they do that's, kind of unacknowledged or, you don't realize how much ministry they're doing. So I actually took a job there, and I think it was really, really fruitful in my life, actually. I was working at a Dominican school, actually, so it was run by Dominican sisters.
Oh, beautiful.
Which are amazing.
Yeah.
And so, all the people that I was working with were really faith-filled people, and, it was really beautiful to do life with them and to kind of accompany them in their lives and have them accompany me in my life. And, it wasn't ministry in a lot of the ways that I imagined myself doing ministry, but it was a ministry, and ministering to the kids, ministering to my colleagues turned out to be, a very valuable way of serving the Lord. It also gave me the opportunity to serve the young adult community in the parish. They didn't have a young adult ministry there. They didn't have any Bible studies or anything whenever I moved in. They had plenty of opportunities for the college students, which is how my husband was working in the Catholic center there. But so I ended up starting a Bible study there just because I saw that there was a need for it. And it was pretty amazing. It was pretty shocking. It wasn't something that I was getting paid for, not something that, I had any job doing. It was just something that I volunteered for the parish. I just went to their faith formation person and asked if I could do it. But it ended up being my most successful, ministry numbers wise. And so it was amazing. Like, I was working in ministry, trying to get people to come to events in college and, doing it for work and really putting in a lot of hours, trying to make ministries happen. But it was when I wasn't getting paid, when I wasn't logging any hours, when I was honestly just, I would send out one text, in a group chat, and then all these women were just flocking to this young adult ministry. So one night I was just like, why is it working when I'm I'm prepping for an hour and sending out one text, and suddenly this ministry is the most fruitful, numbers wise. We never know the fruitfulness of our ministries, sure. But I ended up getting the opportunity to do that. So, it's interesting how the Lord works and what he intends. And, so that was kind of what I was doing. And, once that season had closed and my husband decided to move on to another job, we wanted to come back to Louisville just because I love the city so much. I was really sad to leave. He really wanted to be able to come here, but with his job, it just wasn't working out. I was pretty adamant that this is the city that I wanted to minister, that I wanted to be for a long time. So we ended up only being gone for a year and then coming back here.
That's amazing. That's like the Lord giving you an opportunity to just get a little bit like it's a big pause button.
Mm-hmm.
Like you needed that time to gain a little bit more perspective, and then boom, it's time.
Yeah, I mean, it really was an opportunity for humility for me. I mean, you're leading up in college. You have, you're getting these scholarships, getting all of these things on your resume. You try to win all the awards. All those like things that the world tells you to do to prepare for your big break out of college.
Yes.
And I had done all of those things, and for a lot of my college career, I was really of the girl boss mentality, and trying to be the best that I could be, and trying to build up my career, and all of those things that aren't necessarily bad, but can lead to a lot of pride over time. And so to actually take that opportunity to the first job to accept outside of college, something that a lot of the world is not going to boost up as an amazing occupation to start off with, and to leave a good job here to go do that. I think it showed me how much I cared about my vocation. But it also, gave a real invitation to do what the Lord wanted to do, and not necessarily what the world says to do. A lot of people thought I was crazy for, moving and taking something that is, a less than job when you have such, you're on the career pathway and
climbing up the ladder, but you got to make sure you're climbing up the right ladder. Otherwise you end up in a vacuum. There's nothing up there. So.
Yeah. I mean, for me in college, they're telling me to apply for, the Fulbright and the Marshall and, all of these scholarships. And it's like, it sounds really good to apply for these graduate programs, try to get them for free and, take all of these opportunities, use all the networking that you've built up. But if the Lord isn't asking you to go to Oxford or to go to Cambridge, then why would you? You have to listen to what the Lord is asking of you, or else, you're not going to find fulfillment in those places.
Yeah, that's exactly it. When I came home from college, I spent a short time in seminary discerning with the Diocese of Owensboro. And when I came home, I, in my mind, was thinking, okay, it's time to do amazing things. So I applied for mission work, and I just didn't get accepted to anything I was looking at. Timing wasn't working, and I wondered what God was doing. And I remember I had been the president of our pro-life club at Western Kentucky, and we did a lot of activism on campus, and we even won an award with Students for Life at the Students for Life conference at my senior year, which was just this massive thing in your mind, like, oh my gosh, I'm a pro-life rock star, right? Like crazy stuff. And I remember Scott Klusendorf, who was like one of the presidents of one of the big bioethic groups that served at the conference there and throughout the country. And he posted on social media once that he said, if you're a recent college graduate, this is the wrong question to ask. How can I be a pro-life rock star right now? Here's the right question to ask. What are the books that you need to read? What schools do you need to continue attending? What mentors do you need to find so that you can continue your studies and train so that by the time you're 40, you actually deserve to be heard on a national stage? I was like, whoa. And then he went and listed all different things he recommended. And I gleaned a lot from that. That was like a pivotal moment for me to say, John, you have no clue what you're doing, and you need to humble yourself too. Like, I think God teaches us to get in that posture of receptivity and listening and waiting so that we know when to act and when to serve effectively, so that it's not about us. That's awesome. So your vocation to marriage, that's a beautiful topic. I would love to really delve into a little bit. Like, what was that discernment like? And did you discern other vocations before that? What was that experience for you?
Yeah. So actually, I'm really blessed that the sister that had introduced me to Focus and had this beautiful radical conversion when she entered into college, she actually ended up discerning a religious vocation and is currently in formation. I believe she's three or 4 years in. So she's, off being a nun in Rome right now.
Oh, wow.
Living the life and really loves it and finds a lot of joy in the preparation of hopefully, vowing her life to the Lord in perpetual vows. So I was really blessed to have her discerning her vocation and, being really close to her and kind of getting a front row seat into something that a lot of people don't get to witness. And then I had one of my really good friends as well was pretty heavily discerning in college. So, that question was, on my mind as well, seeing two of the closest people in my life discerning vocations really heavily. And so, I began to ask the Lord that question pretty adamantly, I would say, in college, and kind of, really pestering him a lot about that question. And I would say I was pretty open to both vocations at that time. But the Lord just it wasn't the right time to give me an answer. And so I kind of kept that door open for a while. But actually, towards the middle, the middle of my college experience, I, began to read a lot of books about vocation, really became interested in it, particularly the vows that are made in religious life. So poverty, chastity, and obedience, and was really drawn to those. And, falling in love with the church really opened up a lot of doors for what the Lord might ask of me. And, I really just in prayer and praying with that, and, really wanting to know that answer, I began to see a lot of beauty in religious life. So over time, I felt the Lord was calling me to visit different religious orders. So I took that step, and actually, by the time that I visited the first religious order, I was pretty convicted that that's what the Lord was going to call me to. And, I was really drawn to the intellectual aspect of it, of just giving your life totally to the Lord in that way. And just being witness to such a beautiful vocation. So I went on several visits with amazing religious sisters all across the country, and was really drawn to each one for different reasons. But in each vocation visit that I had, I just, something, I would love it. I would love it, all of their charisms. It seems like it fit exactly with my life. And, I loved being there. But, at the end of the day, just reflecting on each one as they came and went, each one I was like, well, I want to visit another one. It doesn't feel like the exact right fit. And so I was in discernment with my spiritual director during all of that. And, with each one, he would tell me, like when the shoe fits, it fits. You don't have to shove it on. And so with each one, I would say, I might come back to that one because I really did like it, but, I wasn't sold on any of them. But there was one that I was really interested in, actually. So I was kind of holding out for that one. I booked that one for my last visit. It was over pretty much a year that I was scheduling different visits.
So was it like a weekend experience?
Yeah. So a lot of come and sees, are different for different religious communities, but most of the ones that I was interested in had a lot of women interested in them. So they would have, 2 a year or 4 a year. So you knew when they were coming up. Okay. And so you'd spend like the weekend or like 4 days with their community living life
beautiful.
with them. Yeah, I would encourage, anybody that's interested in it to go and do that, because, it's really beautiful.
Yes, we need more men and women to discern religious life. I think that's so, I don't know if we have a vocations poster for women discerning religious life at all in the Archdiocese. There might be, but I just haven't seen it.
I'm not sure that I have as well. It's hard when you're not in an area where you see a lot of young religious orders, but they're out there, you just I think that I was lucky in having my older sister discern, my best friend discern, they had already put so many of them out on the table for me. And, there's so many that very, very young, out of college, just young people joining religious orders. So I was very, very drawn to that.
Yeah.
But there was one that I was holding out for, and, all those came and went. And this one, I was really excited about, really nervous to go to. But I went, and everything was beautiful. Everything was intellectually correct. And I just fought with the Lord the whole weekend, I wanted to join. I thought that I would join right out of college for this religious order. I had been in conversations with them. And their vocation director there, but I just lacked peace. And I was just, I wrestled, and I left that retreat, and I prayed, I spoke with my spiritual director, and I I was so angry that I wasn't at peace with it, because I wanted to give my life to the Lord so badly in that way. And, you know, through all of that discernment, you know, I wanted to give my life to the Lord. I wanted to be sold out. I wanted to be a saint. And I figured this was the way to do it. And thank God for my spiritual director, because, you know, he could see a wider picture. And, you know, he actually just asked me when I was, you know, talking to him about, you know, the order that I had visited, that I wanted to join so badly, but I didn't have peace about it. And I felt like the Lord was asking me to do something that I couldn't do for him. And he kind of helped me to realize that, you know, maybe what I had perceived the Lord was asking me to do wasn't what the Lord was asking me to do. In that, you know, we can be wrong sometimes at what we hear the Lord say in prayer. And, you know, and sometimes it takes bringing it to a spiritual director for him to realize, you know, and kind of have that conversation of, you know, the Lord, the way that he speaks is full of intricacies. And it was very pressing for me to realize that, you know, I can be sold out for the Lord in a way other than religious life. I can be a bride of Christ through my marriage. And so that really opened up the doors for discerning marriage pretty much for the first time. You know, I was open to marriage, I thought, growing up. But I realized in kind of that conversation with my spiritual director that maybe I wasn't really as open as I thought that I was. I had kind of closed it off. Because marriage requires a lot of self-sacrifice. Yeah. And, you know, before discerning a religious vocation, I really wasn't very open to that. I was very much, you know, career-driven, very much my way or the highway, you know. And, yeah, just very centered on doing things the most effective way possible. You know, if I'm going to be a saint, I need to do it the most effective way possible. And, you know, marriage is messy, and it doesn't always look like somebody's becoming a saint through it.
Right, it's not very efficient or effective. Yeah, it seems that way, at least.
Yes. Something that I think about a lot is I remember in college being at my home parish. I had come home for like the weekend or a break or something. And I remember looking around at my parish, and it's kind of sad to reflect back on, but I remember in my head thinking, like, nobody at this parish is holy. Like, none of these people are saints. And, you know, that kind of shows my pride at the time. But just, I was like, there's no nuns here. There's no religious brothers here. You know, everybody here is just, you know, they just go to church and that's it. And it wasn't until, you know, after having, you know, entered into discernment of marriage and, you know, speaking with my spiritual director, of realizing, you know, there was a time that I went back to my parish and I had recollected that thought. You know, I hadn't given it much thought. It was just a passing thought that time that I had won. And I remember thinking, like, oh my gosh, how wrong I was. Now I can go back to my parish and, you know, like, see the older ladies praying in the corner and realizing those are the same ladies that were praying when I was growing up here at this parish. And, you know, seeing the mothers that are trying to keep their kids, you know, from running around in the back, that, like, that's a saint in the making. You know, seeing a large family with just a row of kids, you know, that mom and dad, they're working their butt off for the kingdom of God. And just realizing that, like, you don't have to have a habit to be holy, and you don't have to be the person, you know, with their name all in the bulletin to be holy. You know, some of the holiest people, I think, when we get to heaven, will realize it's that mom that puts on all the events for the other moms at the church. You know, it's the woman that's, you know, serving the meals, like the bereavement meals. And just realizing that, you know, the holiness is much broader than I thought at that time. And, you know, I think we can get in kind of a narrow focus when we get into, you know, the spiritual life. And, you know, with my situation of trying to be as effective as possible, you know, it's not going to look super effective. Nobody's going to witness to your holiness. You know, you're probably going to be forgotten in a couple of generations, you know. But that holiness is just as glorifying to God as the sister praying in the convent.
Yeah, because you're working on eternal life here. It's, I mean, you have to have a 4-dimensional perspective, like what is ultimately going to matter in the grand scheme of things beyond your lifetime for the sake of others and the legacy you leave behind. So it's, You're absolutely right. There are people who've been praying at my parish since I was born that are still there praying every Sunday and many daily mass days as well. And you can often overlook them because your perception can be, well, they have to be habited. And that doesn't mean that we need to then suppress religious men and women who want to wear the habit and be consecrated to the Lord in that way. Like, we need to celebrate them and emphasize them as well, so that there can be, I think, a mutual understanding, mutual respect between the vocations, because I think that can be a fundamental breakdown. Like, people feel like the people in clerics or habits of any kind told the lay people for so many centuries that that's what holiness looks like, and if you're not doing that, you're not holy. Or at least maybe that's the perception people have had for years. So that now there's this universal call to holiness, like JP2 and Pope Benedict have said, that I think has been misinterpreted, almost like we need to then suppress the religious. And it's like, no, you need to respect them and let them lead people to discern their vocations, so that you can have holier marriages and families. Because without the religious, you don't have the preaching, the teaching, the ministering, the sacraments, right? You need the gift of that, so that the families can live their faith effectively. And vice versa. You need holy families so that you actually have young kids, children, sons and daughters discerning their vocation and opening their lives to potentially religious life or priesthood. It's like a complementarity. And so
for sure. I mean, I think a really good example of that is St. Louis and Zelly Martin. They are me and my husband's all-time favorites. We love them because, I mean, it really gives a witness to, you know, how these vocations complement each other and how they're made for each other. So we look at St. Louis and Zelly, who both discerned religious life, and the Lord asked them for something different. And so, you know, it was a heartbreak for them, but it was for the glory of God. And, you know, they found a lot of joy and peace in their vocation. But they ended up raising, you know, 5 daughters who all became religious sisters. And so, you know, one of them being Saint Therese. So, I mean, you look at this family and it's really amazing that we have actually like the materials, the letters, that the correspondence between the parents and the siblings with each other, telling kind of the story of their childhood. And that's, you know, my big nerd thing. I love to read their letters to each other. But you see how the vocation of marriage lived out by their parents was the fruit of their religious vocation. And so, you know, we're working together, and I think that we can forget that sometimes. But there's such a need to see the beauty of each vocation and having that open invitation to discern both. I mean, you even look at, you know, religious stories of people that, you know, were engaged and then they enter, you know, there's many people in my sister's order that, you know, were about to get married and then felt the calling to religious life. And I think we often forget that it goes the other way as well. You know, there's many people, you know, since I've opened up to other people about my story of, you know, being really go-getter for the religious life and ended up discerning into marriage. You know, there's many people that I know that have had a similar experience and just aren't as vocal about it. So, I mean, you see that, like, they both are goods. And you know, we have to be able to recognize that both of them are good things, to be able to make a good choice and to be able to discern well about them. Because I think for me, like, I had a lot of work to do to see marriage as a good and to see it, you know, in its proper place as being, you know, for the glory of God. And I think that a lot of people who are discerning marriage, you know, they also need to be able to see the beauty of religious life in a way that, you know, a lot of people, unless they grow up with an appreciation for religious life, they don't really see the beauty of it as well. So I think that there's, you know, a lot of work to be done in seeing people to allowing people to see the beauty in both vocations.
Yeah, that complementarity is hard when you never see one side. Right. And I think it's the same with children. If you grow up in a family where you never see your mom or never see your dad, like, there can be this frustration, anger, feeling of something that makes you almost not even like the that particular, whether it's your mom and you're a woman and you feel that anger, or if it's your mom and it's you as a man, like there's a mother wound or a father wound. In the same way, there can be a wound there that can be in a collective corporate experience with the whole body of Christ. Like, maybe that's what it has been like in the past 50 to 100 years in the church, that maybe there was an unhealthy relationship that kind of broke down sometime in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. And now we're just starting to wake up to that awareness and trying to put those pieces back together. There's something to that. But you mentioned Saint Therese, like she's one of my favorite saints, and I think she's just an incredible gift to the church today, and declared a doctor of the church and a missionary, like patron of missionaries, even though she was just a habited religious sister who never went anywhere. Though she did appeal Pope Leo the 13th to become a nun. Like that to me is amazing. Okay. All right. Okay, can I enter earlier than expected? You weren't even supposed to talk. It's a papal audience. Like what?
Well, it's amazing. I don't know if you know this is part of the story, but actually her father attended with her. And so you can imagine, little baby Therese, what was she, like 12 or 13 or something like that. Yeah. And her father, is standing by her, accompanying her in that journey, which I'm sure is, I don't know about Therese if it was stressful, but if I was in that situation, it'd be pretty stressful. And to, to think about like her father accompanying her through that and supporting her enough to, go to Rome with her and to, petition on her behalf by his witness with her, I mean, just especially considering just, the witness of parents. I'm sure that was a consolation too of, and may have influenced the Pope's decision, I don't know. But to see that her father was just as willing to offer her up as she was willing to offer herself.
Oh, it had to have been a factor. I mean, the family support is indispensable for that. If it was just a 12 or 13-year-old little girl by herself and no one was around her, like the Pope would be like, hey, where are your parents? Like that would be the first step. But to see her father there supporting her, that's the witness of the family, bringing vocations to fruition. It's so important. That's beautiful. So what other saints do you have that maybe inspired you throughout your faith journey in your vocational discernment and into marriage?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was reading the Diary of Saint Faustina during a lot of my vocational discernment, which I still haven't finished it. It's that long. I kind of took a pause on it and haven't gotten back to it. But, I spoke about just the influence of a spiritual director, and that's something that she actually taught me, St. Faustina. She talks about, she talks a lot about like consolations and desolations in her prayer, and she really went through it in the spiritual life, experiencing, ecstasies and locutions, from in her prayer to being in desolation. And something that she speaks about is, she speaks about that intimacy with the Lord, and the Lord, the Lord told her things directly. I mean, you read in her diary many things that the Lord told her. But then you see towards the end of her diary, and who knows what happens after when I stopped, paused my reading. But, near the end, when she's near her death, she stops hearing the voice of the Lord, and she becomes reliant on her spiritual director. She speaks about how, the Lord spoke to her directly in prayer in her earlier years of the spiritual life, and that now she doesn't hear him, but he has told her that, he's speaking through her spiritual director. And so, a lot of, what we see with the divine mercy now and, all the amazing, the fruitfulness of the divine mercy image and just the theology of divine mercy now, we see all the fruits of that now.
Yes.
But even in her life, she's working with her spiritual director. She's working with the spiritual leaders at the time to kind of express, what the Lord was wanting and sharing this proposal of divine mercy to the world. And she says, that she puts her trust completely in her spiritual director, and, what he tells her, that's what she's going to do. And so that was, actually the day that I had the meeting with my spiritual director after my last retreat that I went on for the Come and Seize retreat for my discerning religious life. The one that I was, very not at peace with. I had a meeting with my spiritual director. He was, busy for like a week. So I had a week of just wrestling with this after I got back. And I actually read that day in the Diary of St. Faustina that, she did what her spiritual director told her to do. So I just prayed to the Lord, I'm going to listen to what my spiritual director has to say, and I'm going to take his words as if you are speaking to me. And just putting that trust in when you have a good, holy spiritual director that you can trust.
Yeah.
And so, when my spiritual director invited me to discern the vocation of marriage, I took that I took that at face value of what the Lord was asking of me, and, you know, putting my trust that he was guiding that discernment as well. So Saint Faustina is amazing. I love her so much.
Yeah, she is. She was she's Crystal and my patron because we got married on her feast day, October 5th.
Oh, wow.
So I've always had a devotion to Divine Mercy since my confirmation, and my mom's always loved St. Faustina, and I never could have planned that. We didn't pick that date on purpose. We were trying to avoid fall festivals and UK U of L football games and everything that would distract from family to be there, and that was the day that God chose and ordained. So it's kind of a theme. We've read half the diary together. We need to pick it back up, though. So as you say that, I'm like, I need to get back on that because it is long.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I mean, I'm just a big fan of just the Polish saints in general. I love John Paul II. Big proponent of Saint Faustina himself, but
Maximilian Kolbe is my confirmation saint. So
amazing. See, yeah, there's so many good ones.
Stuff.
But you know, they're not saints, but I believe that he opened up their cause for canonization for his parents.
Yes, I did hear that of JP2's parents. What a gift.
So I found a lot of consolation in his parents, actually, because, you know, he speaks about his father, you know, being on his knees when he would wake up in the morning. His father would already be praying on his knees, you know, but their beds were in the same room, so praying by his bed, and how, you know, that was kind of a witness to the seminary for him. I think he even uses that language of the seminary in the home. And so, you know, yeah, it's just when you realize that, like, the saints were formed in families, they didn't just, like, come up out of nothing, you know. I think for a lot of, you know, my, you know, developing my spiritual life, I fell into the trap of, you know, viewing it as like a self-help project, you know. I'm really into the self-help genre anyway, so I'm sure that doesn't help. But I think that I kind of, you know, took a lot of spiritual books in that way, and, you know, took a lot of spiritual advice in that way of, you know, if I do these things, that I can build up my spiritual life, you know, I can be this, build up this person that the Lord wants me to be, you know, and just realizing that, I guess not realizing that, like, I'm completely dependent upon the Lord, you know, he's going to do what he wants with me, and just realizing that dependence is, like, so much of the key to the spiritual life. But I think that it's helpful to view the saints in that way, too, of, you know, seeing that John Paul II didn't become this amazing man, priest, pope, you know, all on his own, but he was a fruit of his family. And same with, you know, Saint Therese. She's a fruit of her family, and even go so far back as to see, we have some information about Louis and Zélie Martin, Therese's parents, of their parents, and realizing that they were really holy too, and just seeing that, you know, if I want to be holy, you know, I can start that cycle for my family, you know, of if I'm holy, you know, that might influence my kids' vocations, just the overall vocation of holiness, and their kids, and realizing that holiness, you know, is a cycle that gets passed on.
It's a generational spirit that's actually holy and designed how God makes it. And it's unfortunately the same way for unholiness, right? The generational chains that cripple families for generations. Though there's passages in Scripture, I can't remember the exact space, but it says, you know, the Lord will visit the iniquities of the father upon his children and grandchildren up to the third and fourth generations, but he will visit the fidelity and the faithfulness of a servant to the 1000th generation. And I kind of experienced this in, you know, my own family, because there's a lot of pain and suffering. I look back, a lot of darkness, and God has brought so much healing in our family's life that this is even possible. I got to interview my dad on the podcast a few weeks ago, and that was a miraculous gift. I'll cherish that for the rest of my life. But it was a moment where, as we prepare to baptize our daughter coming up here soon, there's this moment of like the old generation and the new, and having to decide, am I going to be just the continuation of a lot of pain that my dad had to break, you know, in raising his children, or am I going to be that first generation of 1,000? And it was a gift of being able to own that as we prepared to baptize our daughter, of even being able to think about that. Like, to me, that's kind of what you're speaking of. The saints are those people that they had parents and grandparents. I mean, Jesus had Grandma Saint Anne, right? I mean, he visited his grandma. Like you had to think about that. That there's holiness in these families, even with the dysfunction. There is fidelity and faithfulness despite that pain and suffering. So.
I like what you brought up of just, questioning yourself of, how am I going to do this thing of raising your child? And, that's something, being newly married, that has come to my mind as well. A lot of people grew up in, dysfunctional families and divorced families. And, I had a realization, pretty early on, I would say, just realizing, like, how am I going to do this thing? Like, am I going to do this how my parents did it? And just, I think that we get into just a natural way of reacting of what we've seen before. We saw how we were raised. We saw how our parents treated each other, things like that. And just realizing, like, question yourself, like, did that work, and was that effective? And is that how I'm going to do things? I don't know. It's a hard thing to question yourself. But, for many people who grow up in divorced families, you can see that it didn't work, that it wasn't effective, whatever that relationship looked like. And so you have an example of, what didn't work, and you got to be able to work with that. Many people have, examples of beautiful marriages that worked really well, and, they can kind of, start with that, and that's a beautiful basis to follow. You look at Therese, and, you see that she already had an understanding of what love looked like, and she could build off of that. But for those that have different experiences, you kind of have to take it in the other way and saying, that didn't work, I'm going to do something differently, even if it's harder, because I know that's not going to work, and I'm going to try something different.
Right, because when you're trying to avoid what not to do, it's hard to do that if you don't know what to do. Right? But if you see an example of what to do, and you're shown and taught clear examples of what not to do, because the people that are doing what they're supposed to do is aware of that, because it's usually not the other way around. The people that are not doing it the right way usually aren't able to transmit the vision and lifestyle of what to do effectively. And that, I think, is why you're called to virtue and living that out, and not just, figure it out, good luck. Like, that's not necessarily the healthiest way to move forward. And yet, as you speak I think of Christ as the bridegroom, right, pouring himself out for his bride, the church, and the bride of Christ is called to be in that open posture of receptivity. It's like Ephesians 5, right? Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Wives, submit to your husbands. Another way of saying this is, wives, let your husbands love you and demand that they love you the way Christ loves you, right? Don't settle, right? Call them to that sacrifice. Call them to something higher. But then when he's doing it, let him. Right? Let him do this. And that's, I think, what the proper interpretation, and that's what St. Paul's really getting at. Wives, enter under the mission of your husband. What is the mission of the husband? To love unto death. And that's hard when the husband's falling short or not living according to that. And the wife is called to pull him out of his own self-absorption, or whatever the culture throws at men as well. But how would you speak to Christ, the bridegroom, as you discern to become the bride of a man on earth, like an earthly man, that earthly marriage? There's also, you mentioned that not everybody has this insight getting married. Like, I can be the bride of Christ even in marriage on earth. And I'm like, that's a beautiful insight. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think that, if you're lucky, you have the understanding that, sisters, they're not just living that life because they wanted to wear a different outfit. They're living that life because, they're wedding themselves to Christ. And I think a lot of Catholics don't realize that. A lot of people in the secular world obviously don't understand that. And that's something that, there needs to be a lot more catechesis on, just in our everyday lives, of explaining that to people. And luckily, I get to explain that to people all the time, having my sister in a habit. But
right.
I think that we can forget, the image of the wedding feast is all throughout our lives. And really, if we think about our lives, in my experience of a spiritual life, this is all a love story. Your relationship with Christ, it's a love story, whether or not we can view it in that way or not. That's the reality of the situation. We have the Lord who who loves us and is calling us to himself, who views us as his beloved. And, some people don't love the language. I personally do, but, I'm his bride, I'm his beloved, and he's made me for himself. So we think about, the Eucharist. The Eucharist is a wedding feast. I'm going to him. I'm walking down the aisle, in the same way, that I got to walk down the aisle on my wedding day. I'm walking down and receiving my bridegroom, Christ. And, my husband, he's meant to guide me in that journey. So we see that, in religious life, religious people are, their end goal is love. They're going towards love, God himself, capital L, love. And, in marriage, we're going towards love too. But it's through my husband that I'm going to Christ, and he's an image of Christ, for me. So I think for me, it was, I don't quite understand, all the ways that the Lord has worked in the complexities and intricacies of my heart and my story and how I ended up here. But I think that, the slight part that I can understand now is just seeing, like, the Lord, he had to win me over. He had to wreck me a little bit in that discernment of religious life. I think that I grew up a little bit. I think I grew up with some pride happening in my soul. And so I don't think that I was willing to have any self-sacrifice. I wasn't willing to do anything in other person's way. I remember talking with my parents and my sisters growing up and saying, I want 2 girls. I'm going to adopt 2 girls when I get married, and that's going to be the end of that. And I remember my mom or my sisters or somebody in my family saying, what if your husband doesn't want 2 girls? What if he wants to have kids naturally? And I remember thinking and speaking just, well, if he wants that, I'm not going to marry him. I genuinely, and what if he wants some boys? What if he wants a big family? And I just remember saying, well, and then I'm not going to marry him. And that just shows kind of wow. my place in that. In reality, it was pretty tainted. So I think the Lord, winning me over to religious life, having me realize that I am willing to sacrifice myself for Christ. I think that played a lot into, a healthy understanding of marriage, of, to have a healthy marriage, whether we like it or not, it involves some self-sacrifice. And I think that's why so many marriages, are so distorted, is we've lost that concept that, this is a 100% self-sacrifice from both people. And if you're having less than that, there's going to be some brokenness involved. There's some distortion involved. And I know, I could have entered into a relationship, but I wasn't willing to give that 100% self-sacrifice. And because I didn't believe that it was going to be good for me. I think, there's a lot of disorder happening in a lot of our hearts, but, we're trying to look out for ourselves, and for me, that looked like my way or the highway a lot of times. I'm the only person that is going to be able to serve me the way that I need to be served. It's me. I'll serve myself.
It's the old self-reliance, which leads to self-condemnation, which is just of self-absorption and pride, right? And then you gotta let that fall away, and that's hard. That's hard.
And just realizing, what the Lord can do for me, and just, witnessing, a life lived for love. And that was really helpful for me to see, entering into a relationship with my husband, and that you talked about being willing to accept love, being willing to let him serve me, to see that that's not going to hurt me. And, to be able to give of myself, we talked about, you find yourself in a sincere gift of self. Like that's what your vocation is, and whatever vocation the Lord calls you to. But I think that I needed a lot of reworking and a lot of wrecking to be able to understand that reality. And, I began reading the Theology of the Body when we started dating, and I think that
the actual
has
audiences.
It's Love and Responsibility is what I was reading.
Oh, the beginning of
the book.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well.
Yeah, but I mean, I think,
not
you
light
have to
reading.
be able to no, not light reading. But I think marriage is not going to be what you want it to be unless you're willing to see it for the truth that it is, which is self-sacrifice that leads to love and fulfillment. And Yeah, I mean, I see it all the time in movies and TV shows and songs, and now in like social media reels. I see, women saying, I don't make dinner for my husband and you shouldn't too. I don't do his laundry and you shouldn't too. And that's not to say that every woman needs to do that in a relationship, but for a lot of women, that's what love looks like. And in a lot of families, somebody has to do the laundry at the end of the day, and finding out the ways that you can love one another and serve one another. A lot of my spiritual life leading up to now was a lot of discernment, discerning ministry, discerning vocation, that sort of thing. And something that I found a lot of peace with in the past couple of months is like realizing that like I don't have a lot of like heavy discernment happening in my life right now. I'm just kind of open to what the Lord's will is for me every day. And for me, that looks like a lot of just being married now, of just like invitations to do God's will in my daily life. And, God's will for me now doesn't necessarily look like doing active ministry every day of the week. But a lot of times the ministry looks like cooking a nice dinner for my husband, or, being there in a conversation with him or with a colleague. But a lot of it's vocation based, and, taking the step to be a good wife for him now, and he takes steps for me every day to be a good husband for me. And it kind of goes both ways, but just realizing that in itself is a ministry, being a holy wife, a holy husband, that's doing God's will. But we often don't view it in that way, and don't give God credit where it's due in that way.
It's the Holy Family. It's that example of holiness in your own simple family, like as you try to imitate Mary, Joseph, Jesus, and that especially as you open yourself to children. I mean, you had mentioned that original idea of just, I'm going to adopt 2 daughters and my way or the highway. It's like, that is a mentality that this culture imbues within us to say, I have a right to children whenever I want them. And however I want them.
And what gender I want them.
And it's the opposite of, it's not parents have a right to children, it's children have a right to parents. Like, how did we get that backwards?
Yeah. I mean, it's comical when I tell you that, and, whenever I tell people that in the Catholic life, they often laugh at me, but I mean,
it's a common thought, though.
When you talk to people, I mean, many Catholics in the church, many people, just if you're going to go talk to somebody at a coffee shop or something, you'll realize that so many people have this mentality. I mean, we very much have an understanding of, this is how many kids I want, this is what I want my family to look like, and, there's just so much control there. And, I think that that's something that, the Lord had to heal a lot in my religious vocation as well. I mean, you look at religious sisters, often the best religious sisters are the ones that would be amazing mothers too. And you have to have that natural desire to be able to fulfill that supernatural calling. And for me, I mean, you can see in the way that I viewed it, I'm going to have 2 kids and they're going to both be girls and I'm going to adopt them. And I'm not going to be, I had no understanding of being open to life, and no desire to be open to life. And, I mean, you can't go from that to joining a religious order. There has to be that you have to go through that natural order first. And but I mean, the same way, I mean, the people that are amazing mothers likely would be amazing religious sisters too. I mean, there's this concept that we've lost in our culture of, what femininity looks like. Every woman is called to be a mother. And, we don't like that reality a lot of times, but, I look at the different women in my life, whether they're natural mothers or not. And, I can see, each one of you is made to be a mother. I'm made to be a mother, whether the Lord, makes that happen physically or not. And, my sister, who's a religious sister, she's a spiritual mother. But we kind of, we put a lot of controlling factors on that and, really hinder what the Lord might want to do with us, especially just in our culture now of, having that, what do I want as far as children go? And we've kind of lost that sense of, what does motherhood actually look like? What does fatherhood look like? What does family look like? Right.
Reclaiming that it's a delicate way forward. Teaching theology of the body for a living is, it's just a constant awareness that we have to create as many different entry points that draw people into the mystery, not just to be open to receiving these topics and themes and ideas, but to be drawn into where they want more, where they want to actually receive more and to delve into those waters, because those waters have a lot to do with what they didn't receive. what they didn't get, and that's a wound. That's painful. That's not easy. And sometimes it's a wound that's been encrusted over with hardness and perceptions and beliefs that they think they're fine, or they think this is how the world is. So they say they feel judged or accused or misunderstood. And that's not at all what theology of the body or love and responsibility from John Paul II's heart, or even Pope Benedict is speaking about when he's talking about God is love and what that really means, and that relationship between the human love of eros and God's love of agape. Like, how is there complementarity here so that your longings don't get you in trouble, or the pain and abuse or neglect of others don't become reasons to be closed to the church's mercy and goodness and truth, right? Because it's hard truth, but if you speak the truth with love and compassion and patience, I think that's a way to draw them in, right, for these very difficult but necessary topics and things. And I think one of the best ways to do that is not necessarily in a big public forum, right, or a big debate. It's usually in small groups or one-on-one and interactions like that. So one of the things, because I've read several of your articles in the Record, that I was just very touched by one, because it was about a friend of mine, Olivia Dvorak, and what she did at St. James. And my friend, a friend of mine had mentioned to me about how she had met with a lot of different people and developed leaders. And then all of a sudden your article's coming out. Like, after he tells me that, I'm like, okay, something is. So I'm trying to meet up with Olivia to talk, but that idea of small groups, I think, is so needed in the Archdiocese of Louisville and beyond, and that's just one article that I really connected with. But and that might be a topic that we break open a little bit more as we conclude today's episode, maybe, or we have a whole nother episode about it. Who knows?
Yeah, no, I loved getting to speak with Olivia about that, and it is just such a need. I mean, we have such a need for accompaniment, and it comes up in so many different contexts. I mean, it's coming up a lot with the Eucharistic revival happening, the Walk as One.
Yes.
We need each other, and we often speak about the spiritual life being, an individualized, a personal thing, and there is, a private prayer life, a private interior life is important, but, the having people walking with you is so important. I mean, I know in my own spiritual life, witnessing my friends enter into their vocations was so helpful for me in entering into mine. And, you need those people to bounce things off of and to accompany you in the spiritual life. We're not made to do this by ourselves. And yeah, it's so needed. And I think that a lot of people, we have the problem of people not believing themselves to be able to be leaders in that way. And, that's just a lie from the devil. And something that, the Lord will equip you if he needs you to be equipped, But I think, there's a lot of just fallacies in general of, only church leaders, need to be the ones leading these groups, or, I think a lot of people are just looking for their parish to do something, looking for the Archdiocese to do something, looking for the national church to do something, and it really, it's a lot more, it's more grounded than that, it's things happening in different people's hearts and them just starting and working with that. And
it's
I think
grassroots.
People just need an invitation to enter into that longing that they have. I speak to people that, whenever I moved and, there wasn't any Bible studies happening, and, people were saying, I wish there was a Bible study, I wish there was a women's group. It's like, well, then start one.
Right.
I just moved here. I'm just going to put a date on the calendar. Let's do this. I joked a lot, I hear that a lot with men's groups all the time too, of, we really need to, from men, what I've had people asking me, because I led the women's group, at that parish, is there a men's group? I'm like, no, but you can start one, feel free, And I started joking around that I was just going to put a date on the calendar and put in the bulletin and have them all show up and say, okay, you guys, you can talk. Like, this is for you.
Right.
Not my place, so I didn't, but.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's so needed in that way. And it's something that it finds a little bit of solidarity with what we're doing with the Great Novena for the Archdiocese. Like, we've been given permission to be an official group to see if there's viability for it, which I believe there is. We just have to raise awareness and let people know. It's the goal is to prepare for the 2000th anniversary of Catholicism in 2033. It's just a great prayer, 9 years leading up to it. Each year has a separate theme. This is the year of invitation. And Archbishop had mentioned that it's like perfect timing for the end of the Eucharistic revival, which is the year of mission, walking with one. It's like that is what it means to invite and inspire individuals. Like, don't try to change the whole world. And you have a lot of top-down stuff, conferences, pilgrimages, mission trips, and those are all great. And they're needed. You need those. Go away, get a powerful experience and encounter. But if you come home from that big high and there ain't nothing to talk about, nobody's interested, and you can't plug in to integrate it into your actual life, all those normal everyday life experiences bog you down, and they become just what a lot of people treat them like, entertainment or distraction. And they end up becoming idols and not icons. So like graduations, parties, dances, theater, sports, everything just becomes just your life, and you don't see that these things are supposed to point you to something more. So these small groups is one of the efforts we're trying to do to make that happen, and it's a great gift in that way. So that's the hope. So keep that in prayer, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, I talked about being efficiency minded, which is a blessing and a curse. But I mean, you look at the effectiveness of, small group models, and for me, that's the most compelling part. I mean, you see, I think oftentimes we want to go towards those big events. We want to put on a big event in our parishes, or a big event at our schools, or whatever it is. And just realizing, we've done that for a long time. And, in some places it's worked better than others. But I mean, you look at a ministry like in Olivia's ministry, and I mean, you see the effectiveness pretty head on, and just realizing that, several people have done it. I mean, Focus does it really well, I think, with their discipleship model and their Bible studies. And you see, how many religious vocations are coming out of it. You see how many people are joining the church through OCIA. You see how many people are becoming missionaries, how many people are entering into the vocation of marriage. You see the fruitfulness of this. And, it's pretty simple if we can just look at the fruitfulness. I mean, you see the good of a tree from its fruit, and we see that the small group model is working really well in ministries. So.
Yeah, the challenge is to not turn it into a program. Like, you can't just say, all right, here's a booklet, here's a DVD series, now everyone do this. The whole parish is doing it. And then when that booklet or DVD series ends, nobody knows what to do.
Yeah.
The point is to inspire people to see this not as a program, but as a lifestyle. That I need this. I don't need the program or the content as much as I need the fellowship and encounter that content cultivates and gives us a reason. And now when that's over, like, if you're relying on a DVD series, then you've got to see that it's actually the fellowship. It's actually the listening to one another that is so critical. Yeah, it's the friendships.
Yeah.
That's it.
I mean, yeah, friendships are so vital. And, I think that we've kind of lost that, I think, in our culture, that just the basic communication of, and the self-sacrifice that's involved in friendships. I mean, I look at the long-lasting, beautiful friendships of my life. Those are the people that I can call, and, I know that they're going to pick up the phone, even if it's their bedtime, even if they're trying to get to bed, or they're or at the gym trying to work out, I know they're going to answer the phone, and for me, I mean, it's easy to accept that kind of friendship, but, it has to go the other way too. And I think, you have to be the one inviting people to go get coffee. I mean, it could be as simple as that, inviting somebody to go get coffee. But you have to be the one that's going to respond to their texts, and, to make those basic steps in friendship too. So, I mean, those small group models aren't going to work if you only gather on every other Wednesday night and, don't speak to each other any other point. I mean, it has to be, inviting people to coffee, texting them midway through the week, what's your high and low of today, different things like that.
Yeah, I think it's just an invaluable topic that you can't exhaust. It's always something that needs to be discussed and broken open for people to really get it into their minds and hearts. This is something I need to do, to live out at my own parish. And I don't need the bishop's approval. I don't need the priest's approval all the time. I can just reach out to my friends and family, invite them to my house and have dinner with them, and let's open the Bible and talk, and you need to be able to feel the freedom to do that.
Yeah.
Right. Without negating the hierarchy and the structure of putting on the bigger liturgical events, because you need both and. Without the small groups, the bigger things become meaningless. It's objective solidarity, objective unity, but there's no subjective awareness or appreciation for the what's really happening at these big archdiocesan events or national events like the Eucharistic Congress. If you don't have a community to help you live it out, it'll be an overwhelming and powerful experience. But will you really know what's going on? Will you understand the significance? And then when you get any pushback or misunderstandings or indifference, will you let that strengthen you, or will you let that kill your spirit? And that's the challenge of that.
But how necessary those events are to, find those people that you're going to text and to find those people that you can invite into.
Complementarity.
Yeah,
right?
They're both so needed, and we can't have one without the other. And I know I speak to a lot of young adults that are intimidated by just simple adult friendships. And, I understand that, but I mean, something that I tell people is, you just have to be the awkward person sometimes. I mean, you have to be the person that's going to go up to the person that you see at all of the events, and to go up to them and say, hi, I'm Olivia. What's your name? And to get there, I mean, I ask people for their numbers all the time, and I feel like a psycho. But, how am I ever going to invite you to get coffee if I don't have your number?
Right.
And even just, at the parish that I attend, there's this beautiful family that's always at Mass, has all these children that they somehow managed to get through the doors every day. And, it took, I could tell they're a more reserved family, but I mean, I've been going for several months and seeing them. And, it just was like last week that I finally went up to them, because they're always trying to wrangle their kids, and, said, I see you all a lot. My name's Olivia. What's your name? And, that's somebody that's been involved in ministry. So I think you have to take that step sometimes, and especially for people that you think that they're cool. Maybe you like their outfits. For a lot of young women, that's the thing. Or or you see them hanging out with other people that you like to hang out with. If you have those friend crushes, reach out to them and become friends with them. One of my friends, she'll actually ask people like, hi, do you want to be my friend? And I'm not quite there yet, but sometimes you got to be the awkward one.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You got to see people at Mass or at any community event and talk to them.
Yeah, go up to them.
Yeah.
Which is really hard, but
yeah, because it's like going back to middle school and meeting new friends. It's awkward if you go to a new school or something like that. And adults try to, I think, avoid that their whole lives. So when they get comfortable, they try to stay comfortable and they resist change. And I think the church needs to get comfortable with change, because change is coming in the church, and it has to if we're going to grow and continue on. That's the hope. That's the hope. That's beautiful. What other articles and people have you gotten to meet in this work with the record? I think that's an exciting thing to...
many people.
You're all over the place. I can't keep up with you. I just see every article, Olivia Castlen. It's like, all right.
I love it. I mean, I think that I spoke about it before, but I love the city of Louisville. I don't know why I have a real big heart for it, and I love it. There's so much diversity in the churches here. There's so many good people, and what's amazing is all the good people aren't just in one spot. They're all across the Archdiocese, and I'm meeting people all the time. These hidden saints, just in all these churches, and I think for me, I like to highlight those people, and the people that don't get as much light shining on them. I like to highlight them and kind of bring to the surface, things that can be shared across the Archdiocese. I was speaking to somebody earlier this week. I was interviewing a teacher, and she was talking to me about how, one of her goals as a teacher is to share resources with other teachers. And she was kind of joking around, but she was like, why don't we share? Like, we never share, and it would make things a lot easier if we just share. And she was talking about sharing resources and, webinars and all that sort of thing with each other. But I think that's true of, the wider church in general. I mean, the small group model that Olivia was talking to me about, why don't we share that information with other parishes? It's really helpful. I did a story about Spanish-speaking catechesis and just how there was a lack of that.
I saw that too.
Yeah, many churches that are kind of taking that upon themselves and bearing a lot of fruit in doing that. And, that's something that, shining a light on it shares that's, a resource to people. And, I'm somebody that, I love parish ministry, and, that's what I thought that the Lord was asking me to do for a long time. But I can see now, a lot of the building up of parishes is that sharing. It's that sharing of resources. It's letting people know what's out there and what people are doing and giving them ideas and, just a lot of, inspiration for different parishes and different people and things that they can get involved in. So that's kind of where I see a lot of the joy in doing the work that I'm doing.
And in some ways you're serving all the parishes in ways that gives infrastructure and inspiration to them, because they may be stuck in their own silos. They don't see it. There has been a lot of parochialism, people doing their own thing for a long time, that when you shine the light on these things that other people are doing, like I've known Olivia for years. I didn't know she was doing that. Like, that's amazing to me, right? And so I'm now trying to reach out to her because of your article, right? Like, I wouldn't have ever considered that if not for that article. So that's going to, I think, continue happening in the hearts and minds of a lot of people. And I don't know how often you get people to be able to tell you that, that'll be a continued fruit of this ministry, because it is a ministry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really good to hear. Yeah. No, I mean... Yeah. I think that, we have kind of a wild perspective. I speak to young people, doing a lot of young adult, college ministry type things. And they speak about how, the only people that are on fire in the church are young people. I'll hear them say that, the older people at church, they just want to do things the same way. They're not on fire. And then I speak to, the older ladies that, will go to daily masses at the parishes, and, they are so happy to see me, at a parish. And, they're telling me, there's no young people here, and, we're just, us older people, we're the only ones that are, holding on to the faith. And, they feel like they're doing it all by themselves. And then, I mean, it's all of these demographics that feel like they're the only ones doing it. And if they can just see each other and see that they're all doing different things, even if they're not in the same area, I think that can build a lot of camaraderie, among parishes, among a parish itself, among the parishes with each other, the Archdiocese, the nation. I mean, many parishes are doing many beautiful things, many different organizations are doing many beautiful things, and, people just don't hear about it. I mean, like FRP, for example, I've been pretty involved in Louisville throughout my college experience, and I learned about FRP super late in the game. I don't know how I never came across it, but I just didn't. And, it's all about those sharing of resources, of realizing that, there's a lot of good things happening, and we're discrediting ourselves when we say, we're just doing it all by ourselves. And so that's something that I'm trying to build up too in doing my work is, showcasing the good work and showing that, there is a lot of beautiful things happening in our parishes. And something that I really draw a lot from is Mother Teresa is my confirmation saint. I love her a lot.
September 5th, right? That's her feast day.
Yes, and she actually came to Bellarmine University a while ago. It's like 40 years ago, and she came and spoke at the university, which, speak of a lack of information, I had no idea that she spoke at Bellarmine University until like many years being in Louisville. And it's like, how did nobody tell me that? Like, this is my best saint friend. How did I not know this? But she actually did a press conference for news reporters. And in that, one of the media journalists was asking her, like, what do you have to say to the media? And her response is really beautiful. She said, a long list of things, but I have something on a sticky note on my computer that I read all the time. And she says, write something beautiful for God. I mean, you hear her say a lot of times, do something beautiful for God, but she says, write something beautiful for God. So for me, whenever I'm writing an article, some of them are things in my own spiritual life, that I really hold on to, and I love writing those articles about things that I'm really passionate about. And then some things, is something, a community that, I'm not really involved in, that it takes a little bit more work for me to write it. But, just thinking about, I'm writing something beautiful for God. Like, this in itself glorifies God. Me using, I've always loved writing. I actually was going to go into journalism before I had that conversion in high school, or whatever you want to call it. That's what I was going to go into, is journalism. So seeing the Lord, bring me back into that and use, what's not it didn't look to me like ministry, but to use one of my talents, in his church, to write something beautiful for him. That's kind of where I see my ministry now. So
That's magnificent. I love that you've shared all that, because it's so important to build the church up in these ways, and you are a light. You really are a light, and I thank you for this time. I mean, truly. Is there anything that you want that's coming up that you want to share? I mean, remember this we're filming it on this day, but it comes out like probably in a couple months. So maybe if you can think of something that's coming out in January, February, March, maybe something to mention for everyone, because that's probably when this will come out in January sometime. So.
That's so far ahead of time.
I know it is. Now, if there's something really pertinent, we could probably bump you up in the schedule and get you come out earlier, but
No, I don't have any events that I can think of off the top of my head, but...
Anything you want to plug?
I mean, we spoke about Parents of the Saints a lot. I am currently reading a book right now. It's called Parents of the Saints. And, that's... I don't think you have to be, in the vocation of marriage or discerning parenthood, or being in the process of raising kids to be interested in this book. But it kind of gets to that point of, this everyday holiness that I was talking about. It shares the stories of, the parents of the saints. So not people that necessarily were canonized themselves, although several of them are, like St. Thomas More, for example, had many kids and loved them very dearly. But it tells the stories that we know about their lives and how it created these saints. And, I think, for me, it's a great witness of, the people that I meet in the Archdiocese, the people that I meet in my own life, to kind of see them through this lens, of the parents of the saints, of seeing, the holiness in my midst, and I think that it helps me recognize in my own life too, like what the Lord's calling me to do. Something that I've realized in my spiritual life is just like realizing that, a lot of the interior life is, just trying to do God's will every day. And so just asking the Lord, today, like, help me to do your will today, and whatever that looks like. So for me, Parents of the Saints has been really helpful if people want to read that as well. But I mean, I'll also say, we talked about, ministry not always being, the way that we perceive, missionaries or youth ministers or working directly in a parish office or something like that. But something that I read, and I don't even know who wrote this book, but The Soul of the Apostolate is...
Oh, I read that 10, 12 years ago, and it was the thing that brought me home and prepared me. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's an awesome book.
I was reading through it, and, I'm going to butcher exactly what it says, but it's kind of how I try to base my life now, which talks about that any apostolate for the church, whether it's you're getting paid for it or not, any apostolate in the church, you have to have the basis in the interior life for it to bear fruit. And, the interior life, we know that graces come through the Mass. Graces come through the Eucharist. And so having that basis in a Eucharistic life, so for me, that often looks like going to daily Mass. And, that doesn't have to be something super scary. It can be just going one day a week or whenever it fits in your schedule. But just trying to base your life more on the Eucharist, going to adoration and things like that. And just like realizing that if you're going to do anything, if you're going to do anything beautiful for the Lord, if you're going to write something beautiful, if you're going to do some beautiful ministry, if you're going to accompany one person well in your life, that has to have a basis in the interior life. It's not you summoning it up yourself.
Right. You can't give what you don't have.
Yeah, and it's based in the Eucharist. So kind of tying it back to what we started with. But if you don't already have a relationship with the Eucharist, just start there. That's the basis.
Yeah. Spend time with the Lord. That's the beginning of it all. From silence. It was Mother Teresa, her business card. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
It's just a business card, and it said Mother Teresa at the end. But she even spoke this in speeches you can find on YouTube. She said, "The fruit of silence is prayer. The fruit of prayer is faith. The fruit of faith is love. The fruit of love is service. And the fruit of service is peace." And I thought of that as like profound. So we actually incorporated it into the Great Novena prayer. It's actually built into the prayer, kind of right in the middle of it all. And there's a lot of other reasons the prayer was written the way it was, but that's found on the greatnovena.com website. So there's my shameless plug for that. No, anyway, I can't thank you enough, Olivia, for this time on our podcast. Like it's a gift, and I hope to bring you back sometime.
No, it's been great talking with you, and I'm always up for chatting about what the Lord's doing and what he's gonna do.
Oh yeah, and you're a mover and a shaker. You're all over the place. So if there's a particularly big event or article or thing you want to highlight and talk about, like call us up, let us know.
That's great.
Patrick will connect you and make it happen. So that's an awesome thing. So praise God. All right. Well, with that, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. We just ask you to keep us in prayer. Go to spiritinspired.com if you want to see other episodes coming up. But also check out our YouTube channel or other platforms, like and subscribe, so we can definitely increase the gospel's impact throughout the Archdiocese of Louisville and far beyond, force those algorithms to work for the gospel, as we always say. And we will see you next week or next time on another episode of Spirit and Spire. God bless.